Very good morning to you. Today my thought is focused on how very personally God deals with each of us. And we're given lots of examples of that in the New Testament. Jesus meeting with individuals as well as meeting with large crowds and large groups of people. But his dealings with individuals like the Samaritan woman, Nicodemus, the blind man, the man, lots of people. And also Thomas. But I was thinking today about Jesus' dealings with Peter. Because Peter is going to figure in next Sunday's celebrations when we think about the day of Pentecost. Because that was the day when Peter preached an incredible sermon off the cuff to a huge crowd, and thousands were saved. This is Peter, who was bold as brass at times in the life of Jesus, saying whatever came to mind without thinking first. He was a very impulsive man, so it seems. But he was a fisherman when he started, when he was called. Jesus said to him, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. I'll make you catch men." And of course, we see that in Peter's life. On the day of Pentecost, he caught a lot of fish that day. A lot of people. People don't like being compared to fish or to sheep, but the Bible does that to us. But I was thinking about this passage in John 21. You know the story very well, I'm sure. If you don't, read John 21. It was after the resurrection, and they were back up in Galilee on the lake, and they decided to go fishing for the day. Well, their lives had changed an enormous amount. They'd been following Jesus round, going from town to town with Jesus, preaching and ministering to people, and suddenly they had time on their hands. Jesus had died and risen again. He was no longer leading them from one place to another. He was arriving and coming to them and teaching them, but they had no day-to-day purpose, and they went fishing that day, a group of them, including Thomas, dear Thomas, and they caught a huge number of fish at the command of the person standing on the shore, and they realized it was Jesus who had cooked a breakfast, and they sat and ate the breakfast with him. And then Jesus has this conversation with Peter, Simon Peter. Remember, it was Peter who had said to Jesus, "If everyone else deserts you, I won't desert you." And then he denied that he knew Jesus 3 times. And Jesus dealt with that. There's already a record where it says the Lord has appeared to Peter. I think the Lord wanted desperately to sort Peter out and bring him forgiveness and help him to forgive himself for what he had done. And then Jesus meets with him over this breakfast, takes him to one side and says to him, well, I'm sure he took him to one side, may have done it in front of everybody, just like the denial was in front of everybody. This conversation may well have been in front of all the rest. Jesus says to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Now, there are various ways you can interpret that. You could think, well, is he saying, do you love me more than these other people love me? Or do you love me more than you love these other people? Or do you love me more than you love the boats and the fishing and the fish and the life on the lake? Or he may have been saying all 3. And there are challenges to Peter. And each time, Peter replies, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." 3 times Jesus asks him if he loves him. And there is a different use of the word love from the God's kind of love, the agape love, the high devoted love, down to the love of a friend. But I don't think we should get caught up in pedantics there, semantics I think it's called. But Jesus was giving Peter a chance to right the terrible wrong that he had done. But he was also giving Peter a new commission. Instead of saying, I'll make you fishers of men, he says, feed my lambs, feed my sheep, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. And when we look at the book of the Acts of the Apostles and then at Peter's letters, we find that yes, Peter is the spokesperson on the day of Pentecost, and a large number come to faith as a result of his preaching. But in the main, the ones who travel away from Jerusalem and preach the gospel do not include Peter. They do to begin with. He does go to see Cornelius and reap the first Gentile believer. But in the main, it's others that travel. It's Paul and Silas and Barnabas and John Mark who are travelling around. And Philip, the evangelist. Peter is not known as an evangelist. Peter is known as a leader of the church. And Peter taught the church, told them everything about what Jesus had done for him. And so his role, although he was an evangelist, occasionally, his main role was tending the sheep. And you can see the twofold things. And then when we get to Peter's letter, 1 Peter 5, verse 2 says, tend the flock of God that is in your charge, saying that to the people, the elders among the people he's writing to, giving them, handing on, as it were, the baton of tending or shepherding the sheep for the chief shepherd, who he mentions a verse or two later, Jesus, the chief shepherd. So there are different roles, and Peter is confirmed by Jesus in the role to which God has called him. And then Jesus says to him, when you were young, you girded yourself and walked where you would, and when you're old, you'll stretch out your hands and another will gird you. This he said to show him by what death he was to glorify God. And I think in this, Jesus is saying to him, you think you're going to fail me again. You failed me once, you're going to do it again. You're not. There will come the day when you will be taken away for execution, and you will die for me. And you won't fail me a second time. I think Peter needed that reassurance that he wasn't going to let the Lord down in the future as he had in the past. And Peter did not live with recriminations or guilt or regret. He lived in the victory of the cross of Jesus. See you tomorrow. I hope so. God bless. Bye-bye.